So here we go. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome everybody. No trade calls and recommendations are responsible for their own stuff. We're here for educational purposes only. Fourth update of the day here. Trying to celebrate the blog, not the bog, hopefully, the blog birthday. So we'll try and go through as much stuff as we can. Let me see if we can get some charts up. And again, nothing's off the table. Anything anybody wants to look at, we can go through, and we'll do one more update just into or post New York close. So if anybody wants to hang around for the close, we'll do another one to wrap up the day. Hey Mike, how's it going? So what's going on? Yeah, KJ, can you go through money management? Well, that's a pretty long topic, but your second part of your question is, would you be risking 1 or 2% on every trade? We don't look at it that way. I'm not a huge fan of trading that way. Whatever way works for you. I don't believe in risking a fixed amount per trade, right? That would pretty much assume that every trade is created equal. We don't think that way. We prefer to look at it in terms of risk reward, in terms of odds that specific trade has of playing out, or whether it's concept or stats from our journals. So we prefer to look at it slightly differently. Okay, so I'm not a huge, but whatever works for you. Yeah, sure. So here we've had a couple of interesting things. We'll get to it right a second. USD CHF. So what's happening here? Again, month-end flows, market's still digesting OPEC, so a lot of wheeling and dealing across the board, right? So what have we got here on USD CHF? So if we're looking, do you have a specific question on it, Mark? But I mean, if you're looking at it in terms of even, weekly kind of level, you've got these big resistance coming in here. This is very, very important resistance, right? So what's happening into that resistance, we see that in the first test, that's getting defended, right? So we would almost look at that just like the 105 on Euro. Does that make sense? So this is the area that's being defended. So if you look at it on a daily, fairly clear. And if you look at it on a 1 hour, what's happened today is, and as we said, there could be some wheeling and dealing today trying to take out the levels and press for extremes, right? We talked about it on gold, on bonds, across the board. And here it looks like it's failing a little bit. So here the aggressive trade here, even though in terms of time of day, in terms of this suboptimal, this is clearly a place where, gun to the head, you'd be looking to get short, not long, right? So I don't know what kind of time frame you're looking at, Mark, or what if you're looking at something specifically. But for here, this is clearly having a little bit of trouble, and here the aggressive trade would be shorts, right? Now I'd be cautious with very tight stops here, because this kind of 1 hour close, it's one of our least favorite, Mark, right? If you look at the 4 hour, it will likely be very, very positive, so there's nothing to do. But here, if anything, you're looking to get short. I think if you're trying to get tactically short, this is a decent place to try to build. Or if you're trying to trade with a slightly wider stop and then adjust it if you get some follow through. But here, I would say that your targets on the fact, if those highs hold, you'd be looking at the very least, you'd be looking for a move back down into this ascending trend line, right? So you clearly have a decent risk reward, right? And you see here, even, should it really get traction? Again, it's the same, it's a dollar move, right? As we've seen on the other charts, you've got a lot more room to come down. Does that make sense? Does that help? But, the wider stop would make sense. It also depends a little bit in terms of what you're looking at, where your profit targets are, right? But here, the uber aggressive trade is, tightish stop, looking to cover stop, to bank some, and then you got about a 1 to 3 into those lows if you're looking for a quick end of day scalp. We'll have to see if it gets traction or not, right? Exactly what we said also from the beginning of the day. Remember, we tried to, into New York Open, we tried to look a little bit more tactically at the indices, right? So at ES and NASDAQ to give you a little bit of a feel, because we didn't have the weekly webinar, to give you a little bit of a feel of how we trade or what we look at into those sessions. So the two things we focused on were NASDAQ and the ES, right? And what do we say on NASDAQ? Remained our preferred short, right? For a number of reasons. You can look at the recordings, but we said, the aggressive trade is to get short on any strength on NASDAQ, looking for these highs to hold, right? And looking for a move back to take out this level. And we said, don't be surprised if this takes it back very, very quickly before you can blink, because this is velocity of move inside range. Does that make sense? So far, we can't complain on this. This is pretty much what the doctor ordered. And we've been discussing this chart for a long time in the Sunday outlooks too, the fact that our favorite shorts remains NASDAQ here. So what I would look at for the rest of the day is, again, how we trade right here. It's really important that the bulls manage to catch this and hold it back below this breakdown zone, because if not, this will likely have a lot more room to go, right? What is the level we'd be most focused on? And again, we can look at it in the other chart, but you see what's being protected? It's that body from the election day, but we're right back into the election day range. So again, very, very technical, very nice action, and pretty decent move into the open. And the other one we looked at was the ES, right? What did we say on the ES? As it was breaking higher, we said here, classically, what you would expect is if it can't hold above, right, similar to NASDAQ, we'd expect this to come right back down and try and take out the overnight lows, and then possibly all the way back down quite quickly. So again, these are very, very interesting trades. And you see here, on that 1 hour close, short into 2209, right? You've got basically those 13s are being defended, and, nice little move back down. So, fairly decent action, and especially if you can get some follow through, these are decent little trade. Now, keep in mind that the market is still trying to digest all that OPEC news, so it could still be a little bit funky. And what's going to be interesting here is to see, how we close the day, right? There could still be an awful lot of wheeling and dealing across the board. Does that make sense? Yeah, another interesting action here is we talked about the Aussie having to hold this area if it wanted to break higher. And we said that this level ultimately breaks higher, right? It doesn't have to break straight away, but ultimately we tend to expect it to break higher. Here we've got, aggressive move down, and you see how we've got all this level here of support is looking like it's getting front run. So it looks like buyers are trying to hold here. We've actually gone into DS3 pretty much. So here is fairly extended on the day. So you would assume that if it's going to bounce, this is a good place for it to bounce off. Again, for this to really get some legs, you'd want to see gold bounce a little bit too, right? So we'll have to see with the wheeling and dealing here, but I suspect a lot of people here will be started to get fairly interested, right? Looking at this area to hold, and as long as this area hold, you're looking at about this much risk from a closing basis, and you've got about this much reward into the weekly lows before we puked here. Again, is it an ideal setup time of day, et cetera, et cetera? Probably not. Not something I'm focused on, not something I'm trading, but definitely something I'd have my eyes on, right? Yeah, Euro GPB here, again, fairly tactical, moved right back into this level, negative close, defending these highs, and just puked all the way back down. It's a shame it didn't hold this for the bulls, You know, a lot of people will be looking at the support here, and right now it's very, very heavy. It's not one you'd want to try and catch, but you see how Euro was trying to coil and get some traction all day, and then it just got hit fairly hard, right? So you can see Euro USD hovering above these highs. Fairly classical action. I don't know if Lucas is in the room, but you know, fairly classical action here. As we come here, probe the highs, then we get these repeated negative closes, and we go right back down, and we take out yesterday's range. Now, here it's keep in mind that when you see these kind of moves on a day like today, a lot of people that made money catching the highs or the lows will feel like geniuses. Now, keep in mind, it's tricky day, right? Because trading tight on these kind of days when you've always got the uncertainty with any kind of OPEC headline that could hit the wires is a bit of a tricky one. Now, of course, hindsight's always 2020, right? But there were a lot of nice setups today that played out that I would have normally traded, but I didn't trade simply because I didn't want to get chopped up in the headline risk. But, you know, it is what it is. It's just another day in the market, right? And yeah, sure. And here, Euro, it's a lot of velocity of move inside range, right? You see how these highs are getting defended in a sloppy manner. These lows are getting defended in a sloppy manner. But as we said, to the downside, it's all about, is this 105.50, 105.50, 105.00, is this going to hold or not? And as long as this holds, we still expect path of least resistance is to be some kind of correction back to the 07s, 08s. Time will tell, right? Exactly. That's, you know, that's pretty much what we're looking at. Sure. Any comments, any questions, anything anybody's looking at, anything anybody wants to discuss, any trades anybody's in, wants to discuss, any... Is Anna around? Anna, you been doing anything today? Yeah, you know, where's that yen chart? Scalping euro, yeah, you know. Where's that yen chart? Where? Let me try and find that. 50's going blind. Right, so we said that it's all about those highs, right? And we said if they can hold above, then we'd expect those 116s to come into play. And we said, you know, it's the day close that matters, right? So this could just be a little stop hunt. If it closes the day above, then we would expect the grind higher to 116 to come fairly quickly. If we close back below, then we would not be surprised to see 110. So not an awful lot has changed here. And, you know, very, very tricky action. What do I think about long cable? Cables, there's been a lot of wheeling on dealing in cable, and if you look at it in terms of our chart, right? And remember we had our, if I remember correctly, gift from the gods short, that double 1 hour close right at the level that got the move back down, right? And here it's just still stuck in right? It's stuck between support and resistance. So as long as it's inside this range, we would have to be partial to the fact that, you know, the edge is buying holds of the 2340s and selling failures of the 2650s. Does that make sense? So if you're looking at it in terms of a trade, sure, it looks like it's trying to coil a little bit here for a move back higher. But I would say cautious because you've got that Euro GPB that somebody took a sledgehammer to its head today. So, right, you could still see some funky flows. But remember, our base case is, you know, dollars going to, we're going to see a correction of this dollar move into the FOMC. So that would also be in line with cable trying to move right back into those 2650s, right? The big question is, would we be looking at this as some kind of cyclical low forming on cable and we would want to get aggressively long? No, we don't think this is expensive enough to get back short for a bigger structural trade, and we don't think this is cheap enough to get long for a bigger correction higher. We still think it's likely going to stay fairly range bound. We have no problem getting nimble inside this range, but you know, once this double failure here, this pure move right here failed, this scrapped the conviction on a quick retest lower, right? So here, is that a 50 back? It might be, eyeballing it, this groove off those. Yeah, you see it's holding a 50 back. So a lot of people will be looking at this hold to signal rotation back into the 123 or possibly higher. This is not a 50 back we would have. We think this is still sloppy inside this sideways range. So I think as a trade, yes, not so much as a swing, but I would agree. And to the upside end, I just say cautious here with this on approach to that 2650s, right? Exactly. Exactly. Any comments, any questions, anything anybody's looking at, anything anybody wants to discuss? Yeah, sure, gold. So gold's exactly, you know, same thing as yen, right? It's trying to probe, it's trying to look for stops, right? As we said today, if it can't take that level out from a day close for a weekly close, then you would expect this to correct higher. If this closes below, this is likely going to be very, very heavy, and then you would have to assume that these 1150s get tested very, very quickly, very, very quickly. So right here, it's a key close for today. Key closes into the end of the week. Below here, you'd expect this next move to take out 1150s very, very quick. If it can't, then you would expect this. Again, keep in mind that on gold, on silver, on these, when you get the bigger turning points, you usually get decent wicks. It's usually you don't get sharp turns off, you know, a close on the lows or a close on the highs on the daily, and then it completely reverses. You tend to get some decent wick action, so that tends to be a fairly good tell. So for the more conservative players, you don't need to be too aggressive. If you don't mind paying up with a wider stop, you can wait for the candle close for confirmation. Usually it makes a little bit more sense, especially for less aggressive traders. Okay. Okay. Yeah, and you know that dollar index, it's right back into those highs. So remember we talked about it today, and you see here it's taken out this level. So it's all about this resistance, right? Is this going to hold? So a lot of velocity inside move here. I mean, is it bid? Sure, as long as it holds here, it's bid. But these are the important levels. Inside, just velocity of move inside range. That's all. Right? Your edge is likely at the extremes. Silver just looks like it's still trying to bounce at that 116. Not an awful lot. Sorry, the 116. I wish. Well, I don't wish because I don't have a position on. But if I had a position on, I wish 116. But anyway, so here it's just hovering, right? I'd have no problem initiating some kind of a build long here. I haven't taken any position yet. We'll be looking at this in the following weeks for sure. Yeah, you know, as we said, the NASDAQ, and we talked about it earlier, you know, this it's particularly interesting, right? And remember, we talked about those 4834s closed below. It's likely going to be particularly heavy, and we'd be definitely looking for this to come all the way back down, you know, 4728s and even lower. So this is the most interesting chart out there for us, sure. ES, we'll have to see the daily. Now, as long as it's above those highs, it's still bid. I mean, if it can get negative on the day, if it can close negative, that would be interesting. And at that point, you'd have to look at the weekly, right? You'd have to start to look at the weekly. But right here, I'd still be focusing on how we close on the day here. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much where we are here. The big question is, are we going to get some more wheeling and dealing on OPEC on crude? And I think really the important thing is how the equities are moving here. Not so much the dollar as see it, dollar, gold, see it as a bit of, wheeling and dealing at extremes. The equity action is far more interesting to me here. Okay. Any comments, any questions, any chart anybody's looking at? Don't be shy. Bunch of usual suspects in here, so probably most of the questions have been answered in the past. And then we can just adjourn and do another session later on the day to see how we close. Well, that'll be probably very interesting. Very interested to see how the equities are going to close. Sure. No, it's very rare for me to trade any of the exotic pairs. Very, very rare. Yeah, the most exotic I would trade, which is not really exotic, is Euro CHF or something like that. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. The big question is how to read the close today, right? How to read the close today. Now, that's a bit of a tricky one because you've also got non-farm payrolls, right? And, that's also why we've been talking about daily closes and weekly close, because you've got a lot of event risk with that non-farm payroll. Do you see what I mean? So it's really a week where there are a bunch of risk events, but we're not going to have a much clearer picture until the end of the week. So what you would have to say here at this 101.50 is that as long as, Anna, because these are the extremes, right? As long as we close above the 101.50, you would expect that, especially into non-farm payrolls, the market to try and stay bid and try to take out those highs, right? If we close below the 101.50, we'd expect the market to try and come back down into those lows. That's the outlook, but does that mean that if we close above 101.50, because expectation is for it to try and stay bid, I'm going to get long in front of this brick wall? Absolutely not. You see what I mean? So the way we look at things are extremely basic, right? If this is the range, top third of the range or bottom third of the range, this would be only possible longs and this would possibly shorts. Middle of the range, it's really a 50-50 shot, no edge. So we're interested in the extremes, right? So, and again, because we have that event risk coming up, we could have a lot of people, a lot of people still on the sidelines, and we'll only see the final acceleration into the end of the week. So we just have to be a little bit patient. And I wish things were clearer, but it's a tricky day, right? If you look at the day we had, when we were trading, we had equities getting sold, bonds getting sold, gold getting sold, everything getting sold. So it's just month-end flows, a lot of event risk, a bit of a quiet day into non-farm payrolls, markets still digesting OPEC. It's a tricky day. It doesn't mean you couldn't have made money. It doesn't mean you couldn't have lost money. But I think the most interesting dynamic is clearly what's playing out on the equities. Sure. And again, we always play for the healthy move, sure. Doesn't mean stuff can't extend, but we tend to prefer to play for the healthy move, of course. Okay. So last call for comments, questions now, or we'll do them in a couple of hours. Okay, good stuff, guys. So thanks for spending some more time with 50. I'll leave the room open, and we'll be back in a while into New York close or just after New York close. Okay. Have an awesome one. Hey, Luca, guys, Thana, everybody, have an awesome one. Okay. Don't get in trouble if you're gonna have to pop in later on, but hope to see you later. Take care.